This video is sponsored by Shortform. Hey guys, it's Justin. This is part 2 of the discussion with the couple students from the Japanese University asking me about language learning, in particular coming off of the back of my TEDx talk on learning. If you haven't watched that TEDx talk yet, I recommend that you watch it. Links in the description, and then we'll jump into this topic. Now, caveat here is that language learning is a big topic. I'm gonna admit, I'm not an expert on language learning. I've looked into the research fairly extensively, and I have worked with many students that are wanting to improve their learning efficiency for languages. So I've got a fair bit of practical experience in helping students through this process, and I figured out what tends to work and what tends to be more of a waste of time. However, there are some points that I wasn't able to cover, mostly because of the fact that this original interview was quite long. I had to go do a workshop straight after this, which is the reason why I'm wearing a suit in the video, mind the suit, and I just didn't have time to go into it in as much detail. In particular, I didn't talk about, number one, what are the beneficial and most practical, useful, efficient ways of using flashcards for language learning, because for language learning there are some really valuable ways to use flashcards, and most people are actually using them in this way already. They're probably just overusing them, or they're not including another part in their system that would make it much easier to handle that volume of flashcards. That's one thing I didn't talk about. And the other thing I didn't talk about is the huge body of research around immersion learning for languages. Now, immersion learning is a little bit more recent. I mean, it's been around for a while, but it's ramping up in popularity recently. It's quite a dense topic. It's very promising. There are some very key principles in immersion learning. If you're interested in language learning seriously, I'd recommend that you go look into immersion learning. But please, what I'd recommend if you're going to do that is be very critical. So there are some people that are teaching about immersion learning, or there are some kind of language learning influencers that talk about language learning, and they dress it as immersion learning, and they have some of the basic principles, but a lot of the nuances are not really there because of the fact that it's a more recently popular topic. The research is not super clear in it. So just for those of you that are very into language learning, you're gonna know that there are parts that I'm talking about that might be a little bit new. There's also going to be parts that are very familiar. You probably already know some of this stuff, and there are some parts that I am missing, and I'm aware that that's not part of the discussion. So anyway, we'll jump into that.
You were talking about step 1 to 3 of learning, and what do you think 1 to 3 steps are in learning a second language?
Second language is a little different because the type of knowledge is different to heavy content, because there's something called declarative knowledge, and this is the what you need to know. So for something like business admin or for science, it's the concepts, it's the processes. But there's another thing called procedural knowledge, and this is knowing how to do something. So that would be, for example, you may know about blue ocean strategies, but do you have the ability to implement it? Or you may know about leadership, but do you have the ability to actually lead and do it? Or playing an instrument. You may know about how to play an instrument, but can you actually play it with your hands? So that's procedural knowledge, and it's different. So you need to know what to do, but you also need to know how to do it. And there's another thing called conditional knowledge, which is knowing when and why to do things. So for example, with a language, you may know that there is a certain word, and you may know how to say it, but you may not know when it is appropriate to say it or not. With most subjects in university and school and things, there is a lot of declarative knowledge, lots of concepts, lots of things to learn. And there is some procedural and there is some conditional, knowing how to do it, solving an equation, knowing when to use the right formula, things like that. With language learning, there is not that much declarative knowledge, but there is a lot of conditional knowledge. And conditional knowledge is very hard to train. There are different strategies for training conditional knowledge. One effective way of doing it is using interleaving. And so interleaving is about practicing something, but not just practicing the same thing again and again and again in one big block, but you're actually practicing, let's say, 4 different things in smaller bursts back to back. And each time you practice it, to make it even more powerful, you should actually be changing the way you do it. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you're learning a second language. Well, let's say that you're trying to just get better at English. So you would have English vocabulary that you've learned. And then let's say that you learned the word economy. A bad way of doing it would just be to say, okay, economy, I've learned economy. And you just do it 100 times, economy. And then you just try to say the word again and again and again. And then you move on to trying to use the word again and again and again and again. A better way to do it would be to say, okay, let's learn 4 different words that are related to each other. I'm going to learn economy, currency, business, and work. Those are the 4 words that we've just learned. So we're going to practice them enough so that we know how to say the word economy, business, right? We can say the words. And then when we're practicing the conditional part, instead of practicing them in isolation, we want to be practicing them together and in different contexts. So we're constantly trying to change up the way that we're practicing it. So when you're learning a new language, it's very common for, you have these textbooks or these apps and they give you an example, right? Like, hello, my name is Justin. How are you? I am good, thank you. How are you? How is the weather today? The weather is fine, or it is raining, right? So instead of just following that, it's better to think of all the variations. So instead of saying, hello, my name is Justin, maybe you should also learn, I'm Justin. Hi. Or hi there. Nice to meet you. My name is Justin. Or hi, my name's Justin, but you can call me something, right? So these are all kind of the same message, but it's actually, they're different words and they're different structures and they're different syntax. And then based on that, someone could reply to you differently. So if you say, how are you? And someone says, oh, I'm fine. They might say, I'm fine. Or they could also say, I'm stressed, I'm tired, I'm okay, I'm not bad, I'm terrible. Most people don't say that they're terrible, but there are lots of things that people could answer with, right? So actually, we should learn all of those as well, because what that will allow us to do is it will allow us to practice more. It means that we're not limited to only being able to practice one thing. We don't want to learn just this. So let's say you learned the word economy. We don't want to put it in a sentence and say, I feel that the economy is suffering right now. And then you remember that sentence and you say it, and the other person responds with something and you have no idea what they've said. And then you can't hold that conversation anymore, right? So that would be very limiting. So we're always thinking about all the possible pathways that a conversation can take, and then practicing as many of those pathways so that when you do go and talk to someone, you're able to carry that conversation for one more step or two more steps. And that builds more confidence and that builds conditional knowledge. Because now you're not just learning economy in one angle, you're learning economy from, if I say it this way versus if someone asked me in this other way, you're learning the economy is not good, or I don't like the economy, or the economic principles are being affected. So we're learning different types of ways of saying all these different words in different contexts. So it's very, very heavy on building conditional knowledge and not so much on declarative. And so therefore, the words that we learn in the first place should be the words that we feel we are able to incorporate in our practice as much as possible. So now that's feeding into it. So now every word we're learning it because we know we can practice it a lot. And then we practice it with lots of variations. And then the next set of words we learn are the ones that we think we can practice a lot. There's this very popular language learning app, and I was learning some Mandarin, and it has this whole section on airports and like traveling on a plane and things. And that makes sense because a lot of people might travel to China and therefore they might want to speak at the airport and ask questions. But for me, I wasn't planning on traveling to China. So even though that was one of the first modules, it doesn't make sense for me to learn how to say takeoff, departure, landing, flight delay, gate, terminal. I don't need to know that because when am I going to actually use that? So a passive learner would just go and memorize those words and just randomly try to practice it in their life. Or they'd never use it in their life. And then this off the side, every evening, they'd just be like going through flashcards to just memorize that word. There's no point. So instead, you should just think about what you can be using and what you can be learning that you can use on a daily basis, that you know already you need to know these 3 or 4 words. So if I wanted to break it down into steps, I'd say number 1, figure out what the most common words you're missing are, right? So you might be speaking in English and you might come to the point where you think, I don't know this word in English. I can say it in Japanese, but I don't know it in English. And just note it down, write it down, and just go through a whole day or maybe a whole week. And just every time there's a word, just write it down and then put a little tally next to it. By the end of the week, you'll have a list of words. This word, I needed it 10 times. This word, I needed to know it 4 times. This one, I only, there's a list of 40 that only came up once. You just start with the ones that were most at the highest tally, right? And you just learn those ones. And then you'll be able to practice that and you'll be able to master it very, very quickly because you're going to be using it all the time. And then the next round, you just keep working down the tally. But the thing is, new words will appear because as you can speak more fluently, you can engage in more types of conversations. So now there are more types of words that you are missing that you can start adding. So before, you might not have been able to have a conversation about politics, but 3 weeks later, now you can. You're missing some words, but you can actually have that conversation. 2 weeks later, you can have a much deeper conversation about politics, right? 3 weeks after that, you can have a whole conversation about politics. And now you're ready to talk about financial stability and international trade, okay? The scope of conversation increases, but it follows exactly your need. And that's usually opposite of what most people do. Most people just start with vocabulary and try to memorize it as much as possible, and then just try to practice it as much as possible. So it's fighting against each other. It's not relevant from your brain's perspective, right? So step 1, figure out what the most common words are. Then step 2, use them in your daily conversation and put yourself out there to use them more often, and then just repeat that cycle. So it's quite a long answer to your question there.
It means for me because I'm learning English, but I'm stuck to business English a little bit difficult, I'll keep doing this.
And especially for you, where you have it's not that you're a total beginner, you have some level of English. It's just that there's another level, and it's quite difficult sometimes to get that next level. And that depends on the type of experience and opportunities for practice that you have.
Now, at this stage, with everything that I've said so far, you're probably wondering this question. It's what I'd be wondering if I was you too. You're probably thinking, how is the sponsor of this video, Shortform, related to language learning? Do they have all these resources on how to learn languages more effectively? Do they cover all of these different books on language learning? They've got some books there. They mostly have books on other things like learning and finance and self-management and things like that. However, there is an interesting feature about Shortform that I only discovered recently, specifically because I was looking to see if they had anything about language learning while in the editing process for this actual video. I didn't actually know about this, and I use Shortform a lot, so I don't know how it escaped my radar. Shortform doesn't just have summaries of books. Normally what they do is they have these book summaries and then they relate it to other books that you might not have read, so you're able to get the benefit of multiple books even though you're only reading the book guide for one. So it saves a lot of time in figuring out which books to read, which ideas might be missing, how biased the author is, stuff like that. However, if you search for something on Shortform, it also recommends articles that were posted about that topic as well. And these articles can also be really, really effective because not only are these articles actually relevant to what you search for, obviously, but also the Shortform team go through and do the same process also for articles. So I found this particular article when I was scrolling through. So this article is The Mystery of People Who Speak Dozens of Languages. You can see it was initially published in 2018 in The New Yorker, which is not a book, right? So it talks about what polyglots, people that can speak lots of different languages, what their characteristics are. You can see quite a deep dive in terms of this topic. Again, I think I was just blind because actually now that I look at the app, there is a massive button in the middle of the screen that says articles. And you can see that they've got a lot of different categories. They've got stuff around communication, they have stuff around education, and these articles seem to be fairly recent as well. I mean, this one's from 2023. It looks like Shortform wrote it themselves around ChatGPT. So this is great new content. I haven't really had a chance to explore it, but it's looking really promising so far. Just adds to one of the additional reasons why you should immediately take action right now too. Click the link in the description where you can sign up for Shortform and get 5 days of unlimited access, as well as a discount on your annual membership. If you're interested, you can check out with my link, shortform.com/JustinSung. And with that, we will get back to the video.
So if you don't have people that are fluent in business language around you, then what do you have access to? Maybe you're not already doing it, but what do you have access to practicing? So maybe there's a club that you could join and they talk about these things with each other in English a little bit more. Or maybe there's an internship opportunity, and as part of that, you have to deal with some English speaking clients. So what can you put yourself in the position to be practicing more of? And you just do it step by step by step. So sometimes in your daily life, you will hit a ceiling because you're not surrounded by that type of conversation. So you need to put yourself in the position first to have that exposure, and then you can then supplement your learning in that direction. It's very difficult to do it if you're changing nothing and only learning new words and then trying to practice that, because you won't have enough experiences and opportunities to practice, okay?